Just before we jump into meeting the wonderful Tiffany from Beep Indigo, I would like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Dja Dja Wurrung country. We acknowledge that they are the traditional custodians of the land and seas and waters of this area. We'd like to acknowledge that they are the first storytellers, and their continued connection to this land helps to really inform ways of moving forward. I would also like to acknowledge if we have any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders in the audience, and share that acknowledgement to any past, present or emerging leaders and Indigenous folks. All right. Now, I would like to introduce you all briefly to the wonderful Tiffany from Be Bendigo, who's going to talk to you a little bit about one of the perks of joining our pre-Accelerator program, which was a membership. So welcome up, Tiffany. Thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us tonight.
That's fine. I won't be too long. So I just wanted to come and say hello on behalf of Be Bendigo, which is the Bendigo Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So I am the member marketing coordinator, so I oversee all the memberships, social media, websites, and anything related to marketing. So, oh, and hello here too. Part of this program, we are happy to offer to every startups, every team, every group, so I don't know how you're calling it, if it's just an idea yet, and it's not a startup, but yeah, we're just happy to offer you 12 months memberships. So you must have received an email this afternoon. I did make sure to send you all the information just in case you had any questions. So what I will need you to do is just to complete the form, return it to me. As soon as I've got all your detail, I will add you into a membership database and send you further details. So the benefits of joining the chamber, I did attach a brochure. I won't be too long, but one of the main benefits, because I understand that some of you are from Bendigo, some are not, will be being part of a member directory. So you're going to be able to display your business contact detail online. This member directory should launch hopefully next week. We've been working on it. We are a bit behind, but we've got approximately 300 businesses part of it. So I think that it's going to be amazing, great exposure as well. And we're going to try to create a lot of connection. Part of the membership, you're going to be able to attend events as well and access all our resources. So I've emailed all the detail. If you've got any question, I will be the main point of contact. So just feel free to send me an email, contact me on Instagram, or give me a call, whatever. I will answer any type of contact. And yeah, welcome on board. And I'm looking forward to see you at one of our events, or help as much as I can succeeding in your project.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Question. I will be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so now without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to tonight's masterclass presenter, the wonderful Craig Hunter from Clear Dynamics. Now, Craig, are you happy to share a little bit of information about yourself before you jump on in? Fantastic. Feel free to jump on up. Make yourself comfortable.
Thank you very much, Jess. Thank you all for coming tonight. Really appreciate your participation in the program. So as Jess said, my name's Craig, and I've been fortunate to be part of Startup Central Victoria, particularly since this round that Startup Central Victoria has had its second phase. Previously, it was under the auspice of Bendigo City Council. Now, I'll probably flip a little bit just the order on this slide, because I want to follow up in relationship to Be Bendigo, and really just part of, I suppose, the masterclass session to give some people some context. That I'm the Director of Government Engagement at Clear Dynamics, but I've played many roles, and I've been involved in the company pretty much since its inception. But if I was to say one of the critical, important things of the success of Clear Dynamics has been our involvement within networking, within the Bendigo community. And that's been quite extensive. And it goes back to the previous role that I was involved in, which is the company that the founder of Clear Dynamics and myself previously started, which was an enterprise software company as well, knowledge management and content management. But for both these companies, one of the things that we have done and been very active in is our networking. And you can see that although I am playing the role of the chairman of our consortium for Startup Central Victoria, my previous role, and one of the key previous roles I've had, was the chairman of CVBN, was the Central Victorian Business Network, which is now Bendigo. And one of the last things I did as the chairman of CVBN was to merge together the Chamber of Commerce with CVBN. And that ultimately became Bendigo. And one of the key values of doing that business networking task is not only did it create business opportunities for both companies for us to work within the region, but it also enabled us to get access to incredible people that are in the room right now that have worked in our company, the Kohler family, and many other people within the Bendigo region. And it also enabled us to get on the radar of state government and federal government, and then getting on the radar of state government and federal government. Those networks then led us to ultimately our private equity group that invested in our company. And so you can see there under my current role, our first 5 years, we had no debt and we had no investment coming into our business, just started with 2 staff. And then eventually we've raised over $50 million. And for a Bendigo company, that's very... So,
just press the button. Keep going.
For a Bendigo company, that's very unique. So there's a thing called the Valley of Death for investment within our region.
Good day.
Just sharing the chat with everyone. And that Valley of Death, they call it that because people and small companies in Bendigo and in the region, they can raise, say, like $1 million, or $500,000. That's doable and that's done. Then there's this big gap, sort of from $1 million to $10 to $50 million. Just never happens in regional Victoria. And then sort of you get from the $50 million plus, and that happens for people like Bendigo Telco or the bank, or large institutional organisations.
I'm so sorry, ignore me. I need to stop talking.
Okay. So that's okay. I'm still on the first slide. You're doing a great job. So that's probably one of the things that, if I was to say, how were we able to do something that is incredibly unique and never done? And it is a direct result of our business networking. And it's a convoluted chain of relationships. Those relationships from being involved in the CVBN, then getting the attraction of state government, and then from state government recommending legal counsel to us, and that legal counsel then introducing us to our chairman, and then our chairman then introducing us to our private equity group for venture capital. And that's the pathway that we took. So it's not what we planned, it wasn't our strategy. But as a result of that networking, those relationships, that's where we wound up. And so, if there's one thing I can really encourage you in, is what you're involved in tonight is the sorts of things that over the last 15 years that I've been involved in on and off, and that has led us down that journey. And, you need to be prepared to kiss lots of frogs before you're going to find your Prince Charming or your princess. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people you've got to meet, and there are some relationships that you look back on that you felt like were quite distracting, but well worth taking that journey. And you can see that I've been really active and there's quite a lot of voluntary time that I had to put in for us to get on that journey and find that pathway. And so ultimately what that led to was us, at our peak staff, which I think was last year, we peaked at 200 staff. Now that was across Australia, that just wasn't within our region. And we're working with some very large organisations in Australia in banking, utilities. So hopefully I've bought Jess enough time to get to slide 2.
I think let's get on to slide 2. I just don't know if the people in the chat are able to see what I'm saying.
Yeah. So the slide just prior was just providing an outline of what we're going to go through. Can we go back one, or is that too hard for you?
No. I can do the slides. It's just making it all work well on my screen.
No, that's totally fine.
Oh, fantastic. They're saying it's perfect. So everybody just
Okay.
ignore the little
Okay.
green thing at the bottom there.
It's very white to my computer.
Yeah. Away from nuclear device. You're doing a great job.
Thanks, Craig.
So what I'm going to look at today, the 3 areas of vision, culture, and risk. And I'm just going to talk about underlying principles that we have tried to hold to, particularly the founder and myself have had a relationship that we have been constantly looking at these 3 issues. And let me say, by no measure have we got everything right. In fact, I would argue we have made enough mistakes to kill the company every year. That literally there are so many times you're like, oh, surely this is going to kill us. And if I was to say, well, why have we been able to survive with all the mistakes that we've made? How come we're still here? How come we still operate? And it's because of the principles embedded in these 3 ingredients in relationship to vision and culture and risk. And these are probably the areas that I have picked out. So different thought leaders will pick out different things in relationship to vision, culture, and risk. But for us in the journey that we've gone on, these are some of the areas that have really stood out to me. And they are themes that the principles in these ingredients are themes that we just keep coming back to over and over again. How are we going, Jess?
Good. I can definitely move forward for you. Is that what we're hoping to do?
Let's go.
Fantastic. I have that skill set.
Now, as I'm talking, if anybody's got a question, just jump in. We'll do Q&A at the end, but just please feel free. I'm really happy to do just an interactive, and the same online. If anyone's got any questions, I'm sure Jess will be able to handle that as well. So the first thing is inspiration. Creating a sense of purpose and meaning, and creating that sense of purpose and meaning is an opportunity for, number one, you to connect with your own company. That inspirational statement, that passion that you have, that literally gets you up in the morning, that is overarching. It's not the detailed plan. It's not all the granularity of what you're looking to do in your business, but it is that overarching theme that is the thing that is inspiring you to do what you do. And I suppose ultimately the flow-on effect of that is that not only do you want it to be the intrinsic thing that gets you going every day, but it's the intrinsic thing that your staff can connect to that gets them going. It's the reason that your customers engage with you. It gets them going. It's the reason that your investors invest in you. It gets them going. It's the reason that your partners partner with you and gets them going. There is an overarching narrative that is a principle that people can latch onto and latch onto even with their own interpretations. And I've got a narrative within me that I lock onto our company with. And sometimes I'll say it to other people in our company and they're like, well, that's not the thing that gets me going. But there's an overarching principle that is inspirational and that gets people to have a reason for them to engage. And quite often you want it to be a description of the future and more of a guiding principle than a detailed plan. And the reason I say that is because, you know, we all know what it was like back in the old days when you had a Melways in the car, and then you would try to navigate, you know, the Melbourne City Link, and sort of like, if you didn't have the latest Melways, good luck. You know, you're in all sorts of trouble. And having that principle of, okay, well, I want to get in the city and I can see the skyscrapers and that's the direction I'm heading. So as long as I can keep those skyscrapers in front of me and I keep moving that way, and that's sort of like that, what that vision is. It's that true north, that when people start getting lost, when things are going wrong, when there's all sorts of moving pieces in your company that's happening, or you even start losing, you know, the woods for the trees because things are getting confusing, things are getting hard, that vision is the thing that drives you forward and keeps you moving in that direction. And it needs to be something that's pretty stable. We can keep moving, Jess. Thank you. And obviously it's about differentiation. What is the thing that you're looking to do that is different to what the market is doing? And also identifying what is the opportunity cost to your industry? What is the opportunity cost to your customers? What is the opportunity cost to, you know, even to be as bold as what is the opportunity cost to your society? And so, you know, obviously one of the themes of Startup Central Victoria is a focus on digital. And so the area that we play in is what's called enterprise software. And enterprise software, there's a very high failure rate. In fact, I think it's 80% of projects fail and 90% of projects are over budget, under delivering functionality. Like, it's unbelievable. And literally costs the industry trillions of dollars a year. It's a really high failure rate.
It's very motivating, Craig.
Yeah, I know. And yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so for us, that's one of the things that gets us going, is what is the cost to our industry, and then even broader, what is the cost to society of that value rate of those sort of projects? And this is with the caveat of projects over $10 million. So I just need to put that caveat. And so one of the things that really gets us going is, well, how do we lift that failure rate? And don't get me wrong, we still experience failures in our industry and with our customers, but we've been able to lift that, and we've been able to lift the success rate comparatively astronomically higher, because we've gone for the approach of automation wherever we can. So rather than humans introducing risk, where as much as possible we're trying to do automation to risk that. So that to reduce that risk. So that's one of the things that gets not just me going. That's one of the things that gets our customers engaged. That's one of the things that gets our staff engaged. Is how can we, as a collective, address that systemic risk within society, particularly considering enterprise software rules the world, you know. So that broader industry engagement and that reason is something that's really powerful. And then also just in relationship to the network that we can create, that there's a potential for an ecosystem that we can create within this region of people that are also interested in this space and also interested in being able to collaboratively work together. And that's really powerful. And we are starting to see some significant things happen within our community. So we're starting to see things like, you know, initiatives of a digital hub being talked about in state government, in local government, with the university. You know, we're starting to see a potential ecosystem where we can be feeding off one another, start to be stimulating. And so the power of that for our community is also another reason that our vision is so important, because it's something that we can lock into. And then the other part of that is in relationship to a long-term direction. And, you know, if the business that you're looking to found and you're looking to work in is not something that is a reflection of your own values and what you're motivated in, it's very hard to travel that journey. Because you've got to consider that, you know, a lot of startups, you know, struggle. So we in Victoria have maybe 5% of our specific way we do technology. We've taken out, copyright on names of products and things like that. There have been some overarching approaches to things that we've taken out a patent on, but we haven't drilled down to the level of the granular technical details of the way we do things, because the granular technical ways that we do things are just evolving at such a rapid clip that it just becomes out of date by the time we actually get the patent. And, the reality is we live in the golden era of fraud. So with what we are seeing happen with artificial intelligence at the moment, and the speed at which artificial intelligence is advancing, and the ability to do a similar or a replica or a copy, particularly in digital, of what you're doing, is happening so quick, and people are so rapidly able to copy your work that, potentially the best protection is innovation and a continuous ongoing innovation. And that was probably the last point in relationship to vision, is that your vision is timeless, and there's not a moment that you've arrived and you've delivered it, that you are continuing to innovate. You're always moving forward on that. And as a result of that, people are only ever able to be trying to catch where you last were in the market, where they could last see where you were in the market. But because your innovation is continuing to go in the background, it's even if they ever catch where you are in the market, that's not where you are now. That's not where your future R&D is. You're already generations ahead, because you've got that continuous investment in innovation.
I guess even if someone did want to take your idea, only you can give the life to that idea in your own unique way.
And that comes back to that issue of passion.
Yeah.
And that's the true differentiation, is the fact that you are so passionate about what you're doing, and it's so well aligned to who you are, that it's not work to continue to innovate and to continue to refine and continue to push it forward. Otherwise, because if it's not who you are, and it's not your true passion, then you will run out of steam. As the person that's trying to copy you will run out of steam, because if it's not their true passion, it's not their true idea, sure, they can do a Me Too offering, but they're just going to land there on that Me Too offering if it's not their passion, if it's not their drive. I know it's not a real simple answer to your question, but hopefully that gives you some ways to think about it. How are we going?
Cross fingers. So we're back on.
We're back
I
on.
can hear you online,
Okay, nice.
thankfully. I'm just now arguing with the slide.
Video.
The video.
Got it.
So feel free to continue
You
on.
keep that argument going. So just while we're on that issue, while we've sort of stumbled onto the issue of AI, so what we're seeing happen right now in advancements in AI, Bill Gates claimed it's similar to the innovation that we're seeing in artificial intelligence. It's similar to the introduction of the piece to society for a blast radius and an impact. I potentially think it might be more akin to the Industrial Revolution. And in the last 6 months, what we have started to see, particularly, and the reason I bring that up in relationship to vision and what you're looking to do in the future, particularly if it's got a component of technology to it. When we are talking about technology now, we're talking about digital now. Well, ultimately, we're talking about artificial intelligence. So to give you an analogy, I love my World War II analogies. Steph knows. When World War II started, there was a period called the phony war. So Germany had invaded Poland. Britain had declared war. France had declared war on Germany, but there was no actual fighting going on between France and Britain and Germany. And that went on for, I think, about 3 to 6 months. Went on for quite a while. And they called this the phony war, particularly on the British side, because they actually weren't engaged in doing any fighting. And I think what we're going to look back on is the period of time that we're in right now, since the release of ChatGPT-4 and the advent of artificial intelligence into both online, the internet information space and knowledge work, that within the next year to 18 months, there won't be content online, or there won't be a knowledge job that has not been affected by artificial intelligence. So think about all the information that's on the internet, the information of humanity, and the call that is being made is that all of that information, barring some edge cases, maybe 10%, is going to be AI influence. And every job that requires professional services and knowledge work. Not that those jobs will be taken, but they will be augmented or influenced in some way by artificial intelligence. And so when you're thinking about your business and you're thinking about the vision that you're looking to achieve within your business, I would encourage you strongly to take that into consideration in creating that vision and thinking about that unique differentiation, that unique offering, that you consider what that is going to mean for your business. Oh, we're back. Look at that. Just in the nick of time, because I can't remember what's on the next slide. Can we go to the next slide?
We can.
All right.
Let me just find the button and hope I don't break anything.
All right. So we're all back and running. They're back online as well.
I believe so. Kerry, you guys online all good? Yep, I'm getting a nod from Kerry.
Awesome. Fantastic. Look at that. We're working as a team, Jess and I. You got it down.
We are.
And we're even recording.
Yeah.
Amazing. Tell you what, can't keep a good girl down. So from a culture perspective, so let's now step across. So, the blast radius of having a vision that is impactful and meaningful and that people can connect with, the main thing that you want out of that vision is how that can stimulate intrinsically yourself and your staff and your customers. So that's what a good vision does, a healthy vision, functional vision does. And that in turn enables your staff to be self-motivated and for them to have all their tools on their belt available to them. So self-reliance, creativity, autonomy, being autonomous, strive for mastery, and to foster healthy relationships within your staff, to have healthy foster relationships with your customers, with your investors, with your executive group, with your partners. Having that shared vision that people can link into means that you've got a shared reality that you can all agree on, that you can all land on. And and I have seen what it's like in our own company when that shared vision is not communicated well, when it's lost, when it's not been communicated at all. Because you watch will rush everyone else's idea, everyone else's agenda, what other people think the vision should be. And that then will create contention and dysfunctionality and disharmony and when people become combative with one another, then we trigger the fight or flight part of the human brain. When we trigger the fight or flight part of the human brain, the prefrontal cortex shuts down. So all of our tools, our creativity, our exploration, our experimentation, all the best things of your staff all shuts down. They will retreat to their corners and it becomes win-lose situations. And wow, have I seen that happen throughout my career. When that shared vision and shared reality and shared drive and goal is lost. It can be really quite damaging. And so you get dysfunctionality rather than functionality. And so articulating that vision well and simulating well with people. And we'll get to the concept of what a simulation partner is and the power of having a simulation partner as well. So what we also want to be aware of is that the damage of dysfunctionality. So, you know, Mark and Steph and Jess and I have worked together in the same company, and we have experienced some people coming to our company at the executive level that aren't what you would call functional. And I've put there as a hot tip, you know, familiarize yourself with what the concept of a narcissist is and what the concept of a sociopath is. And these sound like pretty extreme terms. But I tell you what, you know, number one, in the executive level of business around the world, power, particularly if you start to get some traction, you start to get some momentum, these sorts of people are attracted to executive roles like moths to a flame. And, you know, unfortunately, the recruitment process that we go through in society is ideally situated for narcissists and sociopaths to flourish. Because you think about it, it's 1 or 2, you know, even 3 or 4 interviews. Let's put your best foot forward. Let's tell people what they want to hear. Let's hide what you think your weaknesses and faults may be. And of course, sociopaths and that, and communicate up. You know, always communicate our ability, able to communicate up really well. Well, narcissists and sociopaths, that's their superpower. They do that better than they do anything else, far better than doing any actual work. And yet our whole recruitment methodology is geared for these people to flourish. And so if you're not aware of what the traits of these people are, and you're trying to recruit, you know, some talent into your business, and once they're in, number one, it's really hard for you to let them go. And where have I seen that in our business? That people get very invested in the people that they've recruited, that communicate up really well, they tell you the right, they tell you as the founder everything you want to hear, and yet the people around you or your customers, they're just treating you terrible. And that is so damaging and so hard to let those people go. Number one, because it's quite difficult for you to see that going on, because the way they communicate with you is great until they don't, until they're not, then it makes the job easy for you. But if they don't show their hand, wow, it can be really, really hard to pick what's going on. And then you look behind them and underneath them and the train wreck that you see that's happened. And boy, have I seen that happen. And it's hard to let go of these people because you're so invested in employment. You think you've put your hard-earned profit into having that person in your company. And so it's really hard to let go. And I would say that will do more damage to your business than anything else. If you want me to run a prediction, that will do more damage than anything else will do to your company. You can make all the mistakes in the world and it won't do as much damage as that to your business. So that's why having a vision is really important, and understanding what functionality is, what the measuring stick of functionality is and what it is not. It's just so important to have that. And vision is a critical part of that. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then positivity. I love this quote here. Positivity, default state of mind. Do you know why I love that statement so much? Because it's so wrong. It's just not true. It is literally our default state of mind is the exact opposite. It's negativity. It is actually our brain's superpower. It's what we do. Have you noticed that there are no courses on how to be more negative? It's not necessary. And why is it not necessary? Because negativity comes preloaded on the hardware at birth. It is literally our brain's superpower. It enabled us as a species to get off the savannah and into the supermarket. when the hominids were running around the savannah and they heard a rustle in the bush and they thought, oh, that could be a fluffy little bunny rabbit. You know what happened to all those hominids? They got eaten by saber-toothed tigers. And the ones that just assumed it was a saber-toothed tiger, it didn't even stop to look and they just ran for their life. Do you know who they are? They're us. They're us. They're the ones that got to live, have families, and evolve into the supermarkets. Of course, we have now flown the usefulness of assuming that there is a saber-toothed tiger, because there aren't any saber-toothed tigers in there. There's certainly none in the supermarket. Yet it takes 40,000 years for the human brain to evolve. And we've only been off the savannah for 10 at best, you know, go back to the first civilizations in Egypt and Syria, and, you know, maybe 10,000 years that we've been off the savannah. So we've got another 30,000 years of being held hostage to our brains catastrophizing. Why is this important to know for a culture? Because you've got to understand that the people in your company, their superpower is to pick what's going wrong in your business and tell you what's going. That's their superpower. You don't have to train them to catastrophize about your company, you as a leader, your customers, each other. No one has to train them how to do that. You know, it was very interesting. I was listening to Barack Obama be interviewed. It must have been, it was one of his most recent interviews. And someone asked him, I saw this on LinkedIn. So you might have seen it. Someone asked him, what is the most important trait for any employee to have? You know what he said? Come to me with a solution. Anyone can come to me with a problem. Anyone can come to me. It's hard, like it's already preloaded. Our ability to perceive the problems is preloaded. It is just there. It's what we do best. We seek out the threat. But come to me with the solution, or come to me with options for a solution. That's powerful for a culture. And if you can infuse that into your culture, if you can help make your team members aware, I'm not saying that it's not helpful to see that there are problems, but we can all do that really well. It's actually having people that say, I can see there's a problem, and guess what? Here's a couple of solutions. Here's a couple of ways I think we can address it. One of the most powerful things that you can have in your business and that you can foster in the culture of your company. You'll notice there's nothing I'm saying here that you can't use now. If you're a company at 2, you can be using these principles, you know, the principles are the same. And so maintaining context, enabling you to say, okay, it can be worse. It can be way, way worse. Having that ability before you start getting wrapped around the axle of your catastrophic thinking. And also being aware that it is one of the most powerful things in the human brain. Not only is it our superpower to catastrophize, but it actually is the most powerful thing in the human brain to have a grievance. So I see a lot with our customers, our staff having a grievance with our customers, because some of our customers can be pretty ordinary in their decision making. And so that grievance ability of saying, you know, I can see there's a problem here, I can see there's a problem there, I've got a problem with this person, that's our customer, I've got a problem with this supplier, or I've got a problem with this partner, or I've got a problem with this person I work with. That actually travels the same or very similar neurological pathway in our brain to cocaine. It is highly addictive to the human mind, is to have grievance. And so that can take hold in your business and in your staff, you know, that staff culture. Incredibly powerful. And I'll tell you what the crack cocaine for the human brain is. Revenge. Having the grievance and then getting revenge on your customer, or getting revenge on your supplier, or getting revenge on your co-worker. That is crack cocaine to the human brain. So, you know, bringing that to mindfulness and being conscious that that's going on, and helping your staff be conscious that's going on, and that's just a native thing of our brain, lessens the chance that you're going to be held hostage to it, dragging into consciousness and enabling people to be aware of it. And so the other part there was just in relationship to having realistic expectations. And so CBT is a term called cognitive behavioural therapy, and there's far more nuance to this, but this is like layman's CBT. In other words, my understanding of CBT is just simply having a worst case scenario, a best case scenario, and a most likely scenario, and allowing yourself to play them out in your head to the bitter end of each one of those scenarios. So doing the simulation, the mental gymnastics of playing it out to the bitter end, the worst case scenarios happen, the best case scenarios happen, the most likely scenarios happen, and then imagine yourself 6 months later. How do you feel? Ask yourself, how do you feel 6 months after the bitter end of each one of those 3 scenarios? And what you will discover, the shocking thing, I'm going to tell you the secret, here's the secret, the shortcut. The surprising thing is, other than divorce, the death of a family member, or going bankrupt, you're going to feel pretty much the same. Like the margins of how you feel about those 3 scenarios are almost indiscernible. And so what is the value of knowing that? Because when we get wrapped around the axle of our grievance, we get wrapped around the axle of catastrophizing, what we discover is we're burning an enormous amount of fuel on things that, even if the worst case scenario plays out, which it never does, like something else bad happens, but not the thing that you've been burning all this fuel on. And then even then, 6 months later, the way you feel about it is marginally different. And so what the power of having a simulation partner gives you is someone that you can run those scenarios through with. There's nothing more powerful than saying out loud the worst case scenario to someone else. Like the power I find in it is, as the words are exiting my mouth, I'm thinking, Craig, you're an idiot. I can't believe you're worried about that, because literally hearing myself say it and then hearing my simulation partner play it back to me and just say those words back to me, and I'm thinking, actually, that's not what I'm worried about, or that's crazy that I'm worried about that, or why am I so, when I hear that played back at me, the power of just hearing someone else reflect it back to me is quite liberating. Hearing those same words come out of someone else's mouth that you've just told them, you just get them to reflect it back to you. And so by having that simulation partner running down the bitter end of each one of those 3 scenarios, and then asking yourself and asking both of you how you're going to feel 6 months later, particularly when you can find analogies. You can go back in your company, or you can go back in previous jobs that you've had, and you can find analogies of those scenarios playing out. And then now you're looking back and you realize, what one of the analogies I use with my simulation partner is I say to him, well, that was a bad decision. And then 3 months later, actually, that wasn't such a bad decision. And then 6 months later, that was the worst decision we've ever made. I can't believe we made that decision. And then 12 months later, it actually didn't have that much of an impact after all, did it? And then 2 years later, oh my God, I can't believe that. So what is that telling you? That your view of it being a good decision or a bad decision, it's just got to do with where you're standing in time. It's how much, is it 6 months after that thing, the worst case scenario played out, or the so-called best case scenario played out? Is it 12 months later? Is it 3 years later? It's actually just where you're standing in time, whether it was a good or a bad decision or not, the way you look at it. So all of this is enabling you to then be at this situation by dragging these concepts into consciousness, then gives you the power to say, rather than be held hostage by my catastrophic thoughts, which have just got nowhere else to appear than in your brain, like you're the only one that's had your circumstances, you're the only one that's been in your situation, you're the only one that's got your genes, you're the only one that's lived your life. So your catastrophic thoughts have just got nowhere else to appear in your brain. But clearly they're not reality. Just let that thought blow up in your brain for a second. Clearly your thoughts aren't reality. They've just got nowhere else to appear. Now, if you can grab onto that, then you are being set free by being held hostage to your own unuseful thoughts, and you've got the ability to start curating your thoughts. And this is where the true power of positivity comes in. This is the simplicity of that statement on the other side of complexity. The reality is our default state is not to be positive, our default state is to be negative. But if you can drag that reality into consciousness and know that our default state is to be negative, and do the CBT and drag ourselves through the mud in projecting the worst case scenario, projecting the most likely scenario, projecting the best case scenario, then standing 6 months on the other side of that, and then realizing that 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, we're going to have a different view about whether that was a good or bad decision. Then what you realize is none of your thoughts are actually real. They're just your perception of where you're standing in time. So why be held hostage to them? That gives you the ability to start curating your thoughts and letting go of the unuseful catastrophic thoughts and grabbing hold of the useful and powerful thoughts that spiral you up. And that sets you free to actually have a positive default state of mind. But that is the simplicity on the other side of that very complex issue. That's all I've got to say about that slide. That's not enough. So the other one on culture, and obviously something that we're all aiming. How am I going for time, by the way, Jess?
You are looking at just shy of 8 o'clock, and we've got you until 8:30.
I'm in the zone. So from the perspective of trust, obviously trust is something that is really important. And being able to develop that trust with your team and with your customers and with your community as a business. And the number one thing is that we see that is, lacking so much because we're living in the golden era of fraud, is good faith interactions, particularly online, because it's all anonymous. People cheating, ripping you off, copying. It's all people are far more likely to do it when they're not actually face to face with someone. So like we've seen this in banking, for instance. We've seen when the closing down of community branches and local branches, and so then people don't have to face a banker that lives in their community. They don't have to face their community. They don't have to face the broader business society that they live in. And so the incidents of fraud have gone up exponentially within our society with the breakdown of local communities, because people don't have to have that personal one-on-one interaction.
Modern world today leads more and more to less personal communication. Now we're talking about artificial intelligence. So we're going to talk to another person, we're going to talk to the machine. Are we advancing our civilization by doing this? Quite philosophical.
Yeah, it is. Look, then I could literally just spend the next 5 hours straight having that conversation.
For those that are tuning in online, it was a very philosophical question about whether or not AI is going to improve our ability to connect and communicate, or if it might detract from the advancement of civilization. So we're going to put that one on the back burner. Maybe you can discuss it in the end of the session.
And my answer is yes and no. And on one, oh no, yeah, you're going to hate that, but artificial intelligence on one hand, any advances in intelligence that we have had as a society has been exponential for us as a civilization and us as a species. Even just granular points in increased intelligence. So what we have now added to the equation is a new intelligence, and it is exponentially more intelligent than we are. Its capacity in specific domains, not general, but in specific domains, its intelligence is far more than ours. And so there are positives in creativity, in someone else new in the conversation, and new intelligence in the conversation. But there is also a future where my AI so generates an email. I say to my AI, generate an email because I was just in a meeting. It heard my voice in the meeting. It knows there's a to-do item. It spins up an email and sends it to you to say, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. Your AI in your email client sees my message come in. Your company large language model knows what that general response that your company gives to an email like that. It spins up its email and sends it back to me. And we never even talk. And it's just my AI talking to your AI.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Exactly right. And so that's not good. That doesn't foster personal, anything personal. So there's definitely a future that's got a downside. There's definitely a future that's got an upside. And in all these situations, if we're to do CBT 101, it's probably going to be somewhere in between. But anyway, let's not get overly distracted on that topic. I'd love to do. So what do I mean by attempting to reconcile complexity with integrity? So, we know that in a small business, there's hundreds of moving parts. Neurologists will tell us now, if you've just got 25 complex values that you're trying to reconcile with another 25 complex values, using wetware, using the brain, takes wetware the size, a brain the size of the universe, using every atom as an electronic switching mechanism to just reconcile 25 complex values with another 25 complex values with integrity. In other words, it's neurologically impossible to do. And you're trying to reconcile more than 25, you're trying to reconcile hundreds. It's incredibly complex. So all we're doing is the best bad compromise. But you showing your ability to attempt in good faith to try to reconcile that complexity is the thing that will engender trust with your staff and with your team members more than anything else. Giving up, not trying, oversimplifying, not demonstrating the effort to try to reconcile those things does not engender trust. People don't expect you to actually get that right and to be perfect at that. They actually don't expect that. What they expect is for you to show you're working, to show that you're attempting to try to reconcile that complexity. That's what they want to see. That's what engenders trust with your customers, with your suppliers, with your partners, with your staff. It's the effort that they can see that you're making and that they can see you're trying to bring online all that complexity and trying to reconcile it. That's the critical piece. That's what demonstrates good faith.
Because even demonstrating that vulnerability gets them leaning towards you and like that.
Super powerful.
All of it.
Super powerful. Yeah. But also letting yourself off the hook that you're supposed to get it right. It is literally neurologically impossible to get right. So it's letting yourself off the hook of trying to get it right, but having the vulnerability to show your attempt, your effort. Like when you were a kid and you had to do the math equation, you had to show the working. I got the answer wrong, but I'm showing you the working to your teacher. Your teacher's like, well, yeah, I'm going to give you 70% of the mark. Even though you got the answer wrong, because I can see the effort and you're trying to use the principles to get it right. So innovation, and this is obviously something we want to stimulate, and going back to your question, how do we stop someone copying our work and the ongoing innovation? And this also goes to the concept of reconciling complexity, that there's a thing called flow state, and it takes anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes to enter flow state. And what flow state enables us to do is to reconcile complexity a hell of a lot better. So there's a default mode that we're in when we're being distracted. So like when Jess was struggling with the technology then, just me having that moment of looking over and seeing things go on with the screen, and you know, that what that does is that knocks me out of flow state. And so all the complex, no criticism at all, I understand you guys, but all the complex concepts that we're working with here, it takes 20 minutes for me to stand them up and get them all online just in my head, let alone for you to start getting them all online in your head. And then we're trying to reconcile to our business, our life. We're trying to reconcile them to the circumstances that we're in. Now, 20 minutes of no interruptions, and we just start to get all those complex pieces and start reconciling them. That's how long it takes, 20 minutes. Just my phone vibrating in my pocket knocks me out of flow state. Here, I'll let you in a dirty secret. Here's a dirty secret of the human mind. Our brains were not evolved to take in iron through the air. And when you're in a capital city that's got a lot of pollution, you're breathing in iron. That's what pollution is. Pollution is full of iron and you're breathing in. And that's a salt in your brain. And that's knocking you out of flow state all the time. So you're living in a capital city, your ability to reconcile complexity is degraded just because you've been exposed to that pollution. There's a dirty secret for you. This is why you live in the country. This is why you live in the country. And so the importance of entering flow state is, number one, it's when we're at our happiest. As human beings, we're at our best. When we're out of flow state and we're not, you know, so you know you're in flow state. The way I know I'm in it is because I start working, the sun's up, and then next thing I know, I look out the window and there's no sun anymore. And we're like, what happens? Where did the sun go? You lose track of time. Mark would know it well because Mark's a super genius developer. And there will be times where he'll be working away and next thing you know, he can hear the early morning birds tweeting. And he's like, it was like 8 o'clock when I sat there. What happened? You know? And in those moments, Mark loses track of who he is. He loses track of time. He loses track of his own awareness of himself. It is literally when we are our happiest as human beings. And so, you know, if you can enter that state and your staff can enter that state, that is when you get the best productivity from a culture perspective that you will ever get. And the likelihood that you'll retain staff for longer increases because they are being the best version of themselves as well. And then the more distractions there are and the more negativity there is and the more complexity there is that knocks them out of that flow state, you know, because clients, phone calls, or even just social media, you know, then we're in our default mode. And when we're in our default mode, we go back to being on Savannah and we're looking for the saber-toothed tiger. And we're miserable when we're looking for the saber-toothed tiger. But we're still looking for it. And that's when we're knocked out of that flow state. And all we're doing is we're scanning for threats subconsciously. And so Hewlett-Packard did a study and they did an IQ test at the start of the day. They did an IQ test at the end of the day and they had a control group and they took away all the distractions. They took away the phone, they took away their internet access. They only gave them access to the company's SharePoint portal so they could get the information, get the data they needed. They were not in an open plan office, so they were locked away. This does not say much for open plan offices. They were locked away in their cubicles, wherever they were, and left to do their work for the day. And then they had everyone else. And they did an IQ test for everyone else at the start of the day and end of the day. They did an IQ test for the control group at the start of the day and end of the day. They got to the end of the week, and the group that weren't getting distracted by their phones and instant messaging and social media were 10 IQ points smarter than everyone else that was just getting distracted by people walking up to their desk and their phones and, you know, internet and what instant messaging, whatever. Now, how much is 10 IQ points? We were all to light up a marijuana joint right now and just get as high as we possibly can get. Do you know how many IQ points we lose? We lose 5. So you are better. I'm not advocating this, but you are better to run your business, start off with everyone high and take away the distractions. You're going to get a better outcome than people being distracted by their phones, distracted by phone calls, by instant messaging, distracted by people walking up.
So are you advocating this as a culture or a retention?
This is the new business model. Steph, this is the new business model.
That's right.
Still high.
Confiscate their phone.
Yeah, and give them a job. So just think about that from the perspective of creating space for yourself and your staff. So we had a thing called Flow State Friday, where it was Friday afternoon where we tried to guard a period of time where people weren't being distracted. It's hard to do. Still try to do it. It's still hard to do. But wow, you know, you're at least giving them a chance. And then the next one was the experimentation and the scientific method of your idea and applying that when you innovate. So what does the scientific method mean? So I used to be a science teacher, so I can do this off the top of my head. The scientific method is peer-reviewed, independent, longitudinal studies. The average result of those studies aren't being replicated. Sorry? Yeah. Take me for granted. And what does that mean? Well, the scientific method is the thing that underpins basically everything that works. The reason the lights turn on, when the computer works, the reason it works. The reason that this building hasn't fallen down our head, the reason that the traffic lights work, the reason that you don't get electrocuted when you go home and you try to turn on your heater. All of these things are underpinned by the scientific method. But the scientific method doesn't tell us the way the world is. This is the importance of innovation. Scientific method tells us the way the world is not. So let's literally use the example of the world. So we used to think the world was flat. Like literally, as a civilization, we thought the world was flat. Then, you know, we developed a sextant and we discovered the way the stars move through the sky. And we developed a telescope and we could see that, oh, okay, that we are going around the sun rather than the sun going around us. We started to discover that the moon is circling the earth, you know, and we started to discover that the celestial bodies are in orbit. And we realized that once we circumnavigated the world, that it's a circle, what we believe is a circle. So then we put a satellite up into space and we discovered, oh, actually, the Earth is not a circle, it's more of an oval shape. And then we put high definition satellites up into space and we discovered that actually it's an oval with a bulge, because what it is the oceans being pulled towards the gravitational pull of the moon and the gravitational pull of the sun. And so literally we now have gone from being the Earth being flat, and then we discovered that we thought the Earth was a circle, but actually it wasn't a circle. We just knew that the Earth wasn't flat. And then we thought the Earth is an oval, but actually the Earth wasn't an oval. We just discovered that it's not flat and it's not a circle. And then we discovered that the Earth is an oval with a bulge, but it's not an oval with a bulge. It's just not just an oval, just not a circle, just not flat. Do you get what I'm saying? And then now what we've discovered is that actually it's not a bulge as a result of the gravitational pull just pulling it out. What we've discovered is that, and this is just still doing my brain in, that the gravitational pull of the oceans being pulled out, that the tides are not caused by the movement of the sun and the movement of the moon. The tides are caused by the continents colliding into the water that is being pulled out as a bulge. That just constantly, we're just constantly pushing back the frontier of innovation, which is the reason for your business. Because what innovation is doing is pushing back the frontier of the next innovation that we discover. Because the scientific method enables us to test and go through that process of discovering what the next innovative way of addressing the challenge that you're trying to address. That's what the scientific method is enabling you to do. Scientific method doesn't tell us the way the world is, it tells us the way the world is not. It tells us the experiments we don't need to waste time running again, but it enables us to find the future new innovative ways of doing things. I better get to risk. Can I just say one more thing about the law of the farm and day trading? I just want to quickly state the value side of things and the importance of values. Law of the farm is just a very simple principle that turns out you can't cram the scientific method. Who knew that you can't study and then overnight think that, you know how like we used to cram for exams and then think we knew the information? When you're running the business, when you're innovating, when you're running the scientific method, the law of the farm is you've still got to go through the process of, you know, having the hypothesis, running the experiment, getting the result, iterating back through again. And so the law of the farm, basically we're saying is you can't cram that, you actually have got to do the work. Like when you run a farm, you've got to go and plough the field, sow the crop, fertilise it, bit of luck involved about whether it rains, bushfire doesn't come, you don't get flooded out, crop grows, you've got to harvest it, you've got to take it to the processor's got to take it to market, you've got to find a buyer, got to sell it. And the same thing with your product. You can't cram it like an exam overnight and expect tomorrow you're going to harvest the crop. The scientific method is for innovation, you've got to go through that life cycle. Okay. Next slide. We got to risk. What matters most? So when
Can I
you
jump in here?
Sure.
We've just had a question come through from Caitlin online, and I said that that's actually perfect for the segment on risk.
Love
so
it.
I thought I would touch on it now. So Caitlin asks, how can you protect yourself from those who might try to take advantage of good faith behaviour?
Yes.
So just wanted to jump in there and hope that that
Lovely.
this section.
Yes, so let's look at what matters most. And so one of the things I put there is people. People are one of the things that, you know, I would say a big rock. So what do I mean by big rocks, pebbles, and sand? So if you ever run this experiment, going back to our scientific method, the old science teacher in me loves this stuff. If the first thing that you do is you fill up your jar with sand, which we would say is low importance, low urgency tasks, you're not going to be able to put many pebbles in, and you're certainly not going to be able to put many big rocks in. If you first fill up your jar with sand, low importance, low urgency, and pebbles, urgent but low important things, then you're still not going to get any of the most important things, your rocks in. If the first thing that you do is you put in the big rocks, and so I'm giving you an example of big rocks here is the economics of your business, things like cash flow is king, your margin, your profitability, people. We'll come back around to that to answer that question. What's going on in your market? What's your sales? What's the trends in sales? Who your customers are? What your competition is? What's happening in the economy? Legal, you know, are your contracts watertight? What are the regulatory compliance you just have to do? Otherwise, the government's going to come and chase you and do terrible things. In your technology, big rocks. Get your big rocks in first, high importance, and probably high urgency as well, a lot of the time. Then you put in your pebbles, you know, high urgency, low importance stuff, and then you put in your sand, low importance, low urgency. And so you always are doing your big rocks first. You're getting your big rocks in first. Now, people is one of them. And how do you know that people are not taking advantage of your good faith actions? And that is the litmus test of your vision and your culture. And if someone is trying to hold you hostage in relationship to your vision, or trying to hold you hostage in relationship to your culture. And they are not aligning to those things, and they are either trying to manipulate you or inject their own agenda in there, or they've been abusive to people that are around you, or they're trying to take advantage of you in relationship to salary, in relationship to role, in relationship to influence that they've got. And they are, when I say holding you hostage, emotionally trying to hold you hostage, then quite often you've got someone that's overstepping boundaries, you've got someone that's being dysfunctional. And so you are then aware of, as a result of their behaviour in relationship to your values and in relationship to your vision, that this is probably someone that's not a good fit. And they're potentially taking advantage. But you've got to have a measuring stick. If you don't have the measuring stick of your vision, if you don't have the measuring stick of your values, then how do you know that they're taking advantage of you when there's no measuring stick? So you've got to have your measuring stick. Okay, I hope that answers that question. And so we've talked about big rocks and what the principle is there. And so then how do we identify the risks? And so, in relationship to risks, I put down some thoughts. So I just want to throw out there an AI risk for you. And this is just because I found this fascinating. It takes a 3-second sample of your voice to be able to do a deep fake of your voice. So what does that mean? That means that that means a sampler, a voice sampler, can sound like you and ring you up in your company and say, I want to put in an order for, a million whatever units, and can you send it to this address? Or one of your suppliers can ring up and sound like one of your suppliers and say, you haven't paid this bill, and if you don't pay it now, we're going to turn off your internet, or we're going to turn off, your power, or something like that. One of the classic ones that people have got, that this has actually happened, where people have been rung up and said, I'm holding your wife hostage. So this has actually happened, and I want you to pay a ransom. If you don't pay it within the next 2 hours, you'll never see your wife again. 3-second sample of your voice. So basically, what has happened is the downsides of AI are that the lock and key for anything that is voice related and potentially biometrics has been breached. So that's a very interesting risk that's just been introduced into the market with AI. Fun-loving fact, just if you don't want to sleep tonight. I've been I've had, I wouldn't say the privilege is the right word, but I've had the experience of having a front row seat to one of the largest hacks in Australian history. And one of our customers has had hackers coming through the back door through another vendor, and they've been able to break into their company and just steal all their data and steal the data of 15 million customers. And so being aware of the cyber risk, particularly the business now, is really critical. And having good vendors, making sure you're aware of what cyber risks are, using well-known, well-established platforms with the big companies is really well worth doing. And on that front, I would strongly advise you not to nickel and dime your cybersecurity. Basically, that's what I'm saying. And so really what it's about is saying, well, what are our risks? What are the big rocks? What are the things that are really important to us? And how can we mitigate those risks? Last slide, Jess, we're there. We made it. So then, the obvious algorithm to run is the risk level. So how important is it? What's the likelihood of it happening? And what's the consequence? And that goes back to the concept that we were talking about earlier in relationship to CBT and catastrophizing and having your simulation partner and running through that best case, worst case, most likely 6 months later, what's the blast radius to our business? Can we afford then to take that risk. And some of them, you might say 6 months later, yeah, that's a risk we can wear. If it all goes sideways and that worst case scenario happens, we can wear that risk. And then some you're like, absolutely not. There's no way we can take that risk. You know, so it turns out this massive customer of ours can lose all their customer data and still survive. Who knew? I bet you they didn't think they knew. I bet you they thought they were dead in the water. Turns out people still want their loans, so they keep moving forward. You know, so it's a valuable exercise to do, particularly with your big rocks. Do that CBT 101. And then obviously the evaluation process, that's you doing that CBT and working out, you know, what the benefits of taking that risk compared to outweighing the possible damages. And then what's your control strategy? How do you mitigate those risks? And then the most important one is coming back and making sure you review. And you look at those controls on a regular basis, particularly when it's in relationship to your big rocks. You come back and you have it again. Boom.
Way to go, Craig.
We're done.
All right, so what I'm going to do is stop sharing screen and bring our participants that are online into the gallery and bring them over onto the screen so that if you have any questions, we're able to go from there. So while I get that all set up, do we have any questions from the room for now?
I must have answered them on the fly.
Probably a loaded one. How many businesses and ideas did you have before you said?
Thousands and thousands. Thank you for that, Dorothy Dixon. And literally still having ideas every week. It never stops. And that goes back to your point in relationship. How do you protect your idea? There is never this idea that is fixed in time and space. It is constantly moving. So on one hand, you've got your overarching vision, but your execution of that overarching vision, and even though your vision changes, and so it's very interesting. The mantra that my simulation partner and I have used is our only ideology is we have no ideology. And so what do we mean by ideology? There is no dogma. There is no just, this is in the water, this is our truth. Everything is subject to the scientific method. Be it your vision, be it your execution plan, be it the day-to-day strategy that you're running out on the ground every day. That you're constantly exposing it to the scientific method, and with your simulation partner, you are running that simulation verbally. We're running it. You know, we're very fortunate that we've also got a platform that we can actually physically run the simulation. We can physically be running the experiment as well. When I say physically, digitally run the experiment. And I think the more that you are open to constantly doing that, and so the vision doesn't change, right? We're still ultimately trying to do the same thing. We're still trying to diminish the opportunity cost to society and to our industry as a result of the failure of big tech in enterprise software. We're still trying to address that. That's our ultimate vision. But our execution strategy of that constantly evolves, constantly changes, and is always subjected to the scientific method. And it's about just letting go of your own dogma, and discovering your own dogma, discovering your own bias that you didn't even realize you had, and constantly running that experiment and constantly, it's just the grief cycle. You're like, fun fact, running a small business or any business is just constantly, you're in the grief cycle. You're constantly in denial that you've got bias, then you discover the bias, and you're angry at the person that's found it in you, or you're angry at yourself for having it. And then you start bargaining with the people around you, trying to hold on to your dogma. And then eventually you accept your dogma and you start changing, you start letting go. And then it starts again. You are just perpetually in the grief cycle. You know, lovely news. Once again, another reason to keep you up all night.
Okay, so I've got some questions from folks online and we have 3 minutes left and I have 3 questions. So
Right,
let's
all
see
right.
if we can
Now,
put them
get up there,
down.
done.
Hi, Craig. What does your Alamo mean?
Oh, thank you. Great question. So the Alamo was the retreat position for the Texans during the Mexican-Texan War. It's your backup position. It's your fallback. It's worst case scenario. Everything goes wrong. What's your Alamo? Where do you stand? Where is your fallback position that you can tolerate when everything goes wrong? Always good to simulate in the worst case in your CBT, worst case, best case, most likely, to simulate your Alamo in your worst case scenario, your fallback position.
Fabulous. And then Caitlin asks, what is one of your biggest learnings in business to date? You've got a minute.
The people you don't let into your business. It's the people you don't let in. If you say one thing, with the mistakes that we have made in hiring, as damaging as they have been, it's the people that we didn't let in that could have been so much more damaging.
That's a good lesson. And then finally, we have another Caitlin has asked, you said to include AI ML into your vision to help bolster your vision. What are some basic ways to approach this into workflows as someone outside of that field? Like, how would you suggest beginning to implement automation?
Yeah, familiar yourself with the concept of Copilot. So Copilot, Microsoft Office, most of you are going to be using Microsoft Office, or Google's got its own equivalent, which I can't think the name of, which are in the process of releasing. But basically, these are apps that are sidecars that sit alongside Excel, that sit alongside Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, and they are AI tools that enable you to increase efficiency.
Really, very interrupt as a side there, I think because I'm not in the chat on Zoom. But Caitlin, Steph, here, feel free to reach out to me in Discord and I can definitely help coordinate or help break that down for you in your role.
Thank you so much, Steph. That's very generous.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm just translating that online. Now, Craig, do you have any passing words for our participants? You've got 60 seconds.
The offer provided by Be Bendigo in relationship to your membership, my parting words would be make the most of it. It's a fantastic offer. You know, use your membership, get along to those events, and thank you all very much for participating in our program. You know, it's a real honour to have you involved.
Perfect. Thank you so much for tuning in, the folks online. Let's leave the conversation here and we can pick it back up again on Discord. Have a wonderful night, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Great session.